I started this whole campaign on LinkedIn where I was like, if you're at a meeting, should you be formally dressed, irrespective of whether it's a virtual meeting or a real meeting? So I had to play my part.
Right. I think next time maybe I should put my uniform on and come in. I haven't worn it in 44 days.
I know. It's been tough. It's been tough. I think after some time, everyone's going to, at least in my perspective, it's been a wave. The first couple of weeks were tough. Then there were a week or 10 days in between where it felt like a holiday, and now I think everyone's getting antsy again. So
That's true. It's especially us. We've just been sitting at home. It's been way too long for people like us.
it's been tough. It's been tough. I think after some time, everyone's going to, at least in my perspective, it's been a wave.
Ajay, thank you so much for organizing this, by the way. I'm going to go on mute and I'll let you go ahead with everything.
Guys, just give me a second. I am just going to put this one more time on mute on Twitter. In case you want to join us, feel free to come on YouTube live where
Ajay, did you ever think you'd really be doing video? Or have you done this before? Or is this really your...
well, only last week for the first time. See, video is always a part of the plan, but not sort of, I mean, this is more, how do you say, everything was all on the table, but, the catch here is that I don't imagine we'd be in a lockdown and that'd be the best time to start. Actually, it's been a good time to start a few things that we did not, we're pushing back. One of them being, a lot of people kind of wanted to do virtual classes with us. And my preference of face-to-face ones, we kind of push them back, but that kind of gives us an opportunity to get conversant with the new medium. And here we are. I mean, so this is something I'll try and continue. I think for a long time, the whole thing was that do you get to kind of see people, but I think, in a sense, be face to face with them and then do a recording. But I guess it's now, it's more acceptable, I guess, at this people just chat conference software. And it gives all an opportunity to kind of, do things differently. So why not give it a try? That's the whole thing.
Yeah, well, good job. Good job. I think this is something extremely interesting, and yeah, well, good luck. I think it's going to work out well for you.
Well, thank you. I get formally people to continue to join in. So, all right, guys. Good evening, and one more time, welcome on board on AV Geek Chat. Last week we had Sanjeev and people last time, Aditya and Sanjeev and Kaneja. This time we, let's kind of bring another hard hitter. Nitin and me have been geeks. We've never met in person, which is sad. Neither in airport. We kind of face to face. All of you guys. What makes Nitin in his hair today is Nitin's aviation lawyer in the country. I'm more, but one of the he basically all the aviation firm
I think there's some issue with the audio. Let me just.
Good now?
No, you're not. Ajay, your video has sort of ceased, and you are completely frozen now. Oh, well, I guess that's the problem of these pieces of technology. I'm assuming he'll join back very shortly.
Ajay had told us quite well to be well equipped with our Wi-Fi.
I know.
Maybe he's ran out of some GBs here.
Well,
True.
I think what I'll do is that's a good suggestion. With one of the comments that maybe I should kickstart this thing.
Right, of course.
Though I must say we haven't rehearsed anything, so I really don't know what Ajay had in mind.
Oh, needs to
But
be as impromptu as possible, I'm sure.
exactly. So, well, welcome everyone, and my name is Nitin. I'm an advocate by profession in India and a solicitor of England and Wales in the UK. My area of speciality is aviation law. So it sounds very sort of high funda, but it's actually pretty straightforward. It comes. People ask me why aviation law. So I come from a background of lawyers. My grandfather was a lawyer. My father is a lawyer, and I was more or less, like any other kid in school. I had no ambitions. I had no plans, but I did like planes. So it was, when I was finishing class 12, I went online and do. Sure enough, the short thing for me to do at that point was law. So I ended up doing a 5-year law degree from the Army Institute of Law in Mohali. And again, once those 5 years sort of passed, living life, as someone in their late teens, early 20s, I was faced with crossroads on, what should I do and what sort of law should I practice. Then I happened to, Google aviation law, because it was, on one hand, I loved aviation. On the other hand, I was now a lawyer. And unfortunately, uh, when you do graduate from law school, you end up not knowing, uh, you have no practical experience of anything. So I ended up enrolling for a master's degree in air and space law, in fact, at Leiden University in the Netherlands. So it was a 1-year course. I did that from 2008 to 2009. And after which I've moved back to India, and primarily focusing on aircraft financing and leasing. Now, I don't know how much of a background the audience has about aviation law. There are usually, three aspects to it. Number one is the financing and leasing. So that would be buying, selling, leasing, financing of aircraft, which surprisingly is a very deep subject, mainly because of the high value of the asset. The second part is, the regulatory aspect, where, you're dealing with the DGCA, you're dealing with the BCAS, you're dealing with the Ministry of Civil Aviation, and so on and so forth. The third aspect, of course, is compensation matters. So it's, whether it's lost baggage, whether you've had a relative who's unfortunately passed away in a unfortunate incident pertaining to an aircraft, or whether it's you just got hurt and you suffered some sort of bodily injury. So once I moved back, again I was pretty much aimless, but all I did know was that I loved aviation. So it was, I got my first lucky break with when Kingfisher was going through its tumultuous sort of time. And ironically, I was in class with another gentleman in the Netherlands who turned out to be, in the legal department of an aircraft leasing company. And it so turned out that the leasing company had aircraft on lease to Kingfisher. So that's how I got, sucked into that whole rigmarole. Little knowing that that was my first instance of aircraft repossession. So it was very interesting when we, you know, reached the aircraft. They were parked in, obscure parts of Delhi and Mumbai. Um, it was, it was shocking. It was shocking. There was an aircraft that had been parked there in Mumbai with no, um, you know, with no cockpit windows for 6 months. So you can imagine with the monsoon and things, what the it was full of mold, and it was really a health and safety hazard. But that was really my first forte into this field. And after that, I started getting a lot of other work. So one would ask, what is my area of speciality? What do I do on a day-to-day basis? So it could be, an aircraft leasing company who comes in and says, you know hey guys, we are leasing an aircraft to XYZ Indian carrier. It could be any one of the carriers which are operating at the moment. So could you please look at our aircraft lease agreement? Could you please, advise us from an Indian law perspective as to what we require, what documentation should be put into place? So that's where we sort of step in and give, the basics to the client. Um, Apart from that, yes, there's a few interesting things have been aircraft repossession. So whether it was, a certain orange colored airline down south, or a pink colored aircraft, also down south. I'm not taking names, but I'm sure since most of us are av geeks, we know who we're talking about. But that was, not challenging, but it's just, you're always struggling with very passionate people. It's repossessing aircraft is not fun. It's not easy. You basically have, people's livelihoods at stake, people's families at stake. You have promoters who put in their heart and soul into the business. So it's fairly challenging from time to time. So that's pretty much what I do. We also work in the regulatory aspect quite a bit. So we are, my team. I've got a very efficient team which is based in New Delhi. They are always running helter skelter around the DGCA and other authorities. But overall, extremely positive, and uh, an excellent experience. Does anyone have any questions? I think instead of me bantering on uh, in a one-way sort of direction, if there's any sort of questions which anyone has, I'll be very happy to answer them. Or any questions which you may have asked while signing up, I'm happy to answer them.
Nitin, can I just come in? If
One sec, guys. Nitin, thank you for playing the host.
Oh, excellent. Welcome back.
While I was gone, I'm sorry. Reliance just signed up with Facebook, and I don't know, never happened in 6 months. Okay, but seems like I had an unstable router today, and I guess you've already heard from Nitin about his, what he does for a living. I think we'd all love to be closer to airplanes and be the make deals around them as well. Nitin's one of those people who does that for a living. So, guys, kind of, let's start on a slightly lighter note, Nitin. So, how many years has it taken you to kind of, build that collection of aircraft models behind you?
I would say it's taken about, I probably started collecting in the early 2000s. So it's, I think it's been about a fairly long time, at least 18 or 19 years. And I mean, I must acknowledge the fact that my parents do travel a lot. And my father and mother have been, relentlessly supportive of this hobby. So I always get a plane model, whether I'm 16 or whether I'm 62. So that's a big thanks to them.
Lovely. No, so you already, I think I missed the part. I'll go and watch a replay later of what you do. Let's get the conversation started. What are you doing during your lockdown, Nitin, apart from obviously, I know it's a busy time of the year. And I'm guessing COVID's also kind of, accelerated how things are moving in the aviation space. But let's start with what are you doing during the lockdown?
Well, first of all, on a practical sort of basis, I'm parenting along with my wife. So we have a year and a half year old, 1.5 year old daughter. So that does take up most of the time. But thankfully, I work with a lot of clients who are, based either in Europe or the US. So I do get to, have the whole day fairly free, and then work starts later in the evening. So apart from the non-work part, we are doing a few transactions. There are a few private jets which are actually surprisingly being sold, as we speak, by Indian parties. And of course, our aircraft leasing clients are very concerned about what's happening around the world. So we are constantly giving them updates and information of new policies and things coming about.
You bring up a very interesting topic. I was going to come to that next, Nitin. What's happening in the leasing space? I mean, I don't think anyone's seen a thing like this before. So practically around the world, you see most aircraft grounded. I think what 2/3 of the global fleets are grounded at this point in time, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
what are the lessors saying about this, and what are the clients saying about this?
see, it's a knock-on sort of effect for everyone. So I think lessors in the last few years have sort of, got a bad name in India as, as the guys who are coming to enforce and taking aircraft back and killing airlines. But going back to your question, I'll come to the point I'm coming to is airlines naturally are approaching leasing companies for, rent. I mean, of course, if you have a good negotiating team, you're going to start off by asking for, a complete waiver of rent for a few months. There are others who are, asking for deferments of lease rentals. So there are all sorts of things happening. There are lots of commercial teams talking to commercial teams. I'm sure airlines are extremely busy at the moment. But that's where we stand at the moment. That's what's happening, and that's at least from a lessor's perspective.
Okay. And any success? I mean, you don't have to take names, but are people being amenable to the fact that airline companies are not making any money at this point in time, and perhaps they need a break?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I do bear in mind that you hit the nail on the head, sort of thing, whereby saying that 2/3 of the world's fleet is grounded. Now, put yourself into a lessor's shoes. Uh, Fine, you may not be getting your money every month, but at the same time, you don't want that aircraft back because you have nowhere else to place it. So it is, people are listening. Lessors are sitting across the table, and they are sort of working things out. But it's anyone's guess as to how long this is going to go on. So you may sit and negotiate for all your financials and commercial terms for, say, a 3-month period, but then what happens if it continues for another 3 months after that? So everything is up in the air, but overall, lessors and financiers are being supportive to airlines.
All right, but today we also heard. I think there was a Reuters story, for instance, that I don't remember the name of the lessor, but somebody is out there trying to, start. Two lessors are in discussions with a certain Indian airline trying to get about 10 of their aircraft back. So you said, there's no incentive for lessors to kind of take them away right now, but I would imagine they'd still do it in certain cases, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, to be very honest, each case has to really be seen on its own merit. So, I think the particular news article today, I don't think it has anything to do with COVID-19. To be honest, I think in my opinion, it has something to do which is with things which are much deeper and have been problems from before all of this started. So, again, I'm not privy to that. That's my personal sort of opinion.
Yeah, but suppose they had to do it, where would they, would they just put it in storage then, right? So
Yes.
there's a question from Bedik, who's on the call as well. That what is the incentive that leasing companies have to repossess today? Because and a similar question I think came to me on Twitter as well from somebody.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, the main incentive is you're still getting your asset back. Yes, it may be stuck on the ground for a few weeks or a few months, but bear in mind, guys who are coming to repossess now are dead sure that they are not, uh, you know, wanting to continue this relationship anymore. It's unfortunate, but I mean, these guys, what they'll do is they'll deregister, keep it on the ground in India the moment, flights open up, or unless they get specific permission from the DGCA, the aircraft will be out as soon as possible. So the main incentive is, yes, preserve the asset. Whether it's a 5-year-old aircraft or a 14-year-old aircraft, it still holds its value fairly decently, and it's a lot of money involved. So that is the incentive for lessors to take their planes back.
Tell me something, Nitin. I mean, personally, as a follow-up question, what if, what I know from my limited interaction with lessors is obviously there are ironclad terms and conditions, but what if an airline is in despair, is in distress, and, like last year it happened with Jet, a lot of aircraft are going back. What happens in the case of, let's say, an aircraft which is kind of cherry-picked already? Is there, I mean, does the lessor put in the money now to repair that aircraft? Obviously, he does that, but does he bill it to the airline, or how does that go?
Well, so ultimately, what would happen is a lessor would come in, inspect the aircraft. If it requires any maintenance, they will perform it expeditiously. And number one, the first priority is fly it out of the country, so that other fuel suppliers, airports, and other creditors don't come hounding the lessor. So first step would be is to get it out of the country. Second step would be is to follow due process of law, filing applications, before the tribunal under the IBC, depending on whether the airline is in bankruptcy or not. That's what's happened with Jet. So a lot of them did repair aircraft and have filed claims for whatever they spent on such repair before the competent authority claiming that amount of money.
All right, I assume that money still hasn't come to them. Puneet here raised his hand. Captain, I'm just going to unmute you. Perhaps you want to go ahead and ask your question to Nitin.
Nitin, since we are on the topic of leasing, just a question, just slightly related. So most airlines work on the sale and leaseback model.
Mm-hmm.
So out of curiosity, I'm sure you can't divulge the exact details. So when they lease the aircraft back, when they the sale and leaseback, how much of a profit does the airline actually make on an aircraft in terms of percentage, like 5 or 10%? What kind of numbers are these?
Again, to be very honest, even as being I don't represent airlines, so I'm not privy to that number, but it'll be in single digit sort of percentages, if not less. So I mean, we're just looking at the the high value of the aircraft, where even a single digit percentage is a lot of money. So I can't confirm that for sure, but it really depends on number one, how how good, a sort of negotiator the airline is with the manufacturer to get their, list price knocked down, and their relationship with the lessor, how much they want to sell it for.
All right. And just a follow-up question, like you were saying, all airlines right now are negotiating with the lessors in terms of deferring, getting a waiver on the lease rental or renegotiating a lower rental going forward. Amongst these three options, which one has had the most traction so far? Which one are the airlines leaning towards the most?
So I think the most viable option, in my opinion, is a deferral. Where you're not, so there's no loss, there's no gain for anyone. So what, in an ideal situation, what one would do is you defer lease rental payments for 3 or 4 months, and then for that same corresponding amount of time, you extend your lease agreement. So you're ultimately, everyone is put back into the where they would have been at the end of the lease term, but it's just tiding the airlines over this particular period. I
But
think we
wouldn't
will
it
see
make
much more of that.
Okay. But wouldn't it make more sense for airlines to renegotiate the lease rental, because the demand and supply is completely changed now? There's so many airplanes on the ground, so many airlines are shutting down, unfortunately. And technically, there are more airplanes available in the market. And if any airline wants to get airplanes today, it's very easy, and they can probably get a lower rental for the same.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. If I was arguing for the airline, that would be my first ask. That if you don't want to give a deferral, or irrespective of a deferral or a waiver, let's renegotiate how much we pay you every month. Absolutely, and without a doubt. The only limiting factor in that is such agreements don't happen unilaterally. So the lessor will usually have to give its consent to something like that, which in all practical purposes, they won't want to, or they won't.
Okay. And sorry, last question. How expensive are these exit clauses for someone terminating a lease?
So ideally and very theoretically, it never works like this, but it'll be probably a lower number. But one could safely assume, and again, it's very commercial. If I give you a number, I'd just be completely wrong. But it's they can be in millions of dollars. Basically, it's not cheap.
Captain, just to add in there, like Nitin said, see, one part of that, on the first part, how much an SLB would generate, it would also depend on how good, like he said, the negotiation was. So if you've gotten a very deep discount on the aircraft you're buying, you perhaps, and you kind of get it delivered to the lessor right away on delivery, sort of, you're going to make, I think, the most amount of money. So high single digit millions was the number I heard for narrow bodies. A certain blue airline in India used to make that kind of money back in the day. Obviously, if this is going to continue or not, we have to all, see in the future. So, am I correct, Nitin? I mean, I'm sure you heard yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you can, another thing to add to what you said, Ajay, is the most guarded secret is how much an airline is buying an aircraft for. So you'll never be able to get that number out from an airline. It is heavily guarded both by the manufacturer and by the airline, and fairly so, because it's a strategic sort of thing for both.
Yeah. So the more you buy, the better your discount gets, and there's a certain airline which buys a lot of them in one go. So I think you can just put two and two together. So to see which one you're talking about. But, I think Puneet's already kind of asked a lot of questions about leasing. What are the, Nitin, coming to, I think a lot of lessors in Singapore, Ireland, some of those jurisdictions, US, like you said. Somebody asked a question, I don't remember the name. What are the impediments to having, lessors based out of India, or an Indian lessor for that matter? Are there any leasing companies based out of India?
So put simply, the answer is no. and the reason is only one: it's for tax purposes. So there was a study which is available online, which was carried out by the government of India, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, called Rupee Raftar. So the main aim of that was to number one, find what these impediments were, why people were not financing aircraft from money available from banks and other entities in the country. And the ballpark percentage which was found, it's 48% more expensive just purely on taxes to finance or lease from one Indian entity to another Indian airline. So those are the numbers we are talking about, as opposed to someone who's domiciled in Ireland. So there's a 48% difference in taxes which we'll have to pay. That's why we haven't seen any major uh, movement in that project. But there is a big push being made by the ministry, and a very positive one. I think there's no harm in exploring that
That
avenue.
I think there was also the talk that when the gift project went online, the tax-free zone in India, perhaps there'd be more people based out of there. But I mean, do you think there's fundamental changes made to be made as well, right, to taxation laws to be able to have this properly?
Yes, absolutely. The main aim, of Rupee Raftar was to sort of promote Gift City and see whether that can be used as a sort of vehicle to promote that. But yes, there needs to be an overall sort of change. I think the other issue is, you're buying an aircraft in US dollars and you're getting a loan in Indian rupees. That kind of also causes people to get scared a bit. I mean, you can write a PhD thesis on that, but that's the other reason which people found why this would be a challenge. Not impossible, but a challenge.
Sorry, Ajay, I'm just stepping in because that was my question. If I can just quickly ask a small follow-up on that, if that is okay.
Yeah.
So, Nitin, just to understand, are there enough takers in the market? If India was to, let's say, ease the tax rates and everything, are there people interested in actually leasing out in India, or is it just too expensive to get into something like starting an airline? So, is that something that can happen? Let's say if the tax rates are reduced to more competitive rates.
Oh, absolutely. I don't see any reason why, if people see a business opportunity, if banks see an opportunity to make some profit, I don't see why people would not be interested. But then again, it's anyone's guess. No one wants to be the first to take the step, because you just don't know how it's going to react. And, the government has been very supportive, but then you never know whether that support will change, from day to day. So that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, well, rightly said. So I guess I have a couple of questions. Abhijit will first come to you. I'm going to unmute you now.
Yeah, thanks, Ajay. Nitin, my question to you is, like, apart from leasing, I don't know whether you would be the right person to answer this. What's your take on low-cost airlines? As we are into lockdown since so many days, they would be bit heavy on losses on books. So how you foresee the the airline industry now after post-COVID into low budget airlines, and how it would affect the Indian consumers in this sector?
Well, thanks for your question. Again, I'm not a commercial person, but from my reading of what is happening in the market, number one, I feel that once we reopen, the huge amount of capacity that we have, that's going to reduce a tremendous amount. There's going to be, we're going to be less than 50% of what, at least fleet-wise, what we were at before. Um, we are going to see, I've been terming it as, a sort of correction in the market. I think we had reached really, really low levels where, you were paying 1,200 rupees for something which people were just can't make money on. So I think we'll see a correction on that front. But I hope that we use this as an opportunity to learn and to, build on the maturity levels in our market, if I may say so. Like we need a long-term sustainable business instead of, sort of cutthroat competition where airlines are coming and failing. We really need to focus on those people who we want to bring over from the Indian Railways to fly in our Indian skies. But at the same time, we want to make sure that our airlines can do that sustainably.
Hi, Nitin.
Right.
This side. Hello, can you hear me?
Somebody asked a question. Sorry.
Yeah, it's Lavjeet this side. So I have a question. Like usually we see in the lease agreements that there are material adverse effect clauses, and usually there are no force majeure clauses in the agreements. So what is the take of the lessors in the current scenario? Are they claiming the MAE event? And, are they inclined to take, sort of actions which are set out under the agreement against the lessees? Or are they inclined to provide relaxations?
So as I said earlier, I think it's too early in the day for anyone to sort of give a clearer picture on that, because people are not very certain on, number one, how long this is going to go on. So yes, people are being fairly, lessors are being fairly supportive and considering deferrals and things like that. We haven't reached, at least in my experience and work that we've been doing till now, we haven't reached that level of sort of talking about force majeure. There are a few emails going about, but then again, everyone knows that it's not to basically prove force majeure. You have to go to a court. Neither the lessor nor the airline has the time or the inclination to do that. So it's anyone's guess, to be honest. If I gave you a clear-cut answer out of those three options which you gave me, I would be a fool. It's really waiting and watching to see what happens at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, stepping in here, well, perhaps we'll leave you on the leasing part. But one final question: do you see any Indian airlines willingly giving up aircraft at this point in time? Saying, I know there are a couple of jets which were on wet lease flew away, I think in March, but any other aircraft willingly being given up, without resistance at this point in time?
They will happen. They will happen. I'm not really sure about when and how, but I think there will be some aircraft which go back. I mean, I don't have any specifics, and even if I do, I can't really give you any details. But I think we will see some aircraft going back soon.
Okay. I think we'll, we're already getting a good mix of audience questions, given I'm also on a bumpy line today. Sorry about that. But kind of let's change tack a bit. I am just waiting for this unstable connection to kind of resolve itself. Let's go into what we call, the crystal ball. One of the terms I really want to get your peep on today is force majeure is a term that's being, tossed around left, right, and center. Aviation, non-aviation. Do you think? I know it's open for interpretation, but what's your personal take on? Is this a force majeure event? Is this something that is holding the court, or not? Because I would believe my line of questioning further would kind of focus on that then.
Well, see, the thing is, to understand, what force majeure is, the term has been used, all over social media. To put it simply, it's something, an event that happens which frustrates a contract. So the example I've been giving everyone is, Ajay, say I rent you my house, for 10 years. And, after the first year, there's a massive earthquake and the house comes, crashing down. So that then you have the right to stop paying rent to me. So that is, those are the kind of the events which a force majeure sort of instance it envisages. So that's what we're talking about. In my personal opinion, no, it doesn't. None of these will come under the force majeure sort of clause. for a number of reasons. One, for example, airlines, one could argue that airlines are not completely banned from operating my aircraft, assuming I'm the lessor. Say, an airline goes and applies to fly cargo around India tomorrow. They're still using my aircraft. So it's, that there are many, many options where airlines can use their aircraft. It's not, the lessor is not going to sit there and say that, you've been told by the government not to operate, so don't pay me. So do bear in mind that these guys themselves have their own obligations to their banks who finance the aircraft. So it, it's not that easy. I hope I've answered your question, but it's like
Yeah. So
right. Yeah.
I would like to add what just Nitin said. Sorry for the interruption. I would just like to add. Recently, in one of the cases, although it's not related to aviation, Delhi High Court has taken the prima facie view in relation to invocation of bank guarantee. So where they have said that it's a force majeure event and the bank guarantees cannot be invoked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. That is absolutely correct, and that actually goes down to the root point. I should have added that force majeure is something which has to be, it has to be proved. It has to be, a court of law has to declare that it is a force majeure event. So if an airline and leasing company are willing to go through that rigmarole of going to court, ultimately it will be the court that decides. But in my opinion, force majeure clauses are left completely clear of aircraft leases for this reason.
But coming now, Nitin, let's so airlines are throwing the force majeure clause to customers, now saying, hey, we can't refund you money because this is a Six Sigma event, this is a Black Swan event, this is a force majeure event, whatever, left or right, whatever you want to call it. Basically, our fleet is grounded, not because of something that we are doing. So we're not going to refund you your money. You take. So coming to that consumer part of things, do you think if a consumer took, let's say, an airline in India outside to court, would they be able to, airlines be able to prove that they were force majeure is the case it's happening?
That's a very sort of, it's, in my personal opinion, it's a difficult question from the airline's perspective. So for a number of reasons, because the civil aviation requirement, which deals with refunds, clearly states that, in case of a cancellation, irrespective of force majeure or not, force majeure. So if you're arguing force majeure before a consumer court, the consumer court is very likely to immediately say, okay, fine, you didn't operate the flight, you refund the amount of money that this person, paid you, because that's only fair. You haven't provided the service to them. But in these circumstances, we withhold sort of grant of compensation against the airline, which is understandable because it's not the airline's fault that they couldn't provide the service. And that is exactly what our civil aviation requirement says, that in case of a cancellation of a flight beyond the control of the airline, there will not be any sort of compensation payable, but they must refund the amount of money which has been paid. The next question which you are going to come and ask me is about the credit shell, and I would like to take that up now, because that same civil aviation requirement very clearly states that a credit shell could be and can be applied by the airline. The money may be kept in a credit shell. However, it is the prerogative of the passenger to decide whether they want to do that or not, number one. And number two, that it shall not be used as a sort of standard. I don't have the CR in front of me, but I'm very certain these are the two aspects which it touches upon.
No, I read it today, and I agree with you on that. So, but Nitin, then what is the solution for customers? Because obviously, I think Singapore Airlines is refunding, Emirates is refunding. Most people are still stuck up. I mean, I'm getting messages all day and night about how passengers are being sort of, sorry to use the word, stuffed with red shells at this point
Yes,
of time.
I'll add to that, Ajay. I mean, going a step forward, even if we do look at that office memorandum issued by the Ministry of Civil Aviation, it purely deals only with people who booked during the lockdown period. So, I mean,
Yes.
my family has, a couple of lakh rupees worth of tickets stuck, which were booked before that. What happens, for people who've booked a day before? But unfortunately, these are questions which have to be determined by a court. So in our system, if you feel that there's a wrong that is happening against you, your only remedy is going to a consumer court. And unfortunately, in the present times, number one, you can't, because it is on a complete lockdown. And number two, it's going to take you years. And who has the time and money to devote to get that money back? And do bear in mind, these are a series of people who have spent 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 thousand rupees. So in the larger scheme of things, they're not very large amounts of money. So ultimately, it will be some lawyer or someone who is not too concerned about legal costs, who will have to go to a court, get some determination, and apply that, and see. It's basically a test which has to be applied before a court of law.
All right, interesting, but I don't think anyone is touching on that issue at this point of time. But I'm hoping as well. So there's no possibility of I think I asked you this one-on-one as well. There's no possibility of a class action suit being brought across in India. There's no provisions like that, right?
No. It would. You can have you can have a group of people who will go, but you will usually have to apply to a court individually, because each set of facts will be different.
Yeah. So let's get into your crystal ball now, Nitin. Tell us what do you think will airlines survive this crisis? I'm talking all sorts of airlines, so you can give me maybe two answers depending on the size of the airline. But what do you think is going to be the?
I find that a very difficult question to answer, because some will survive, some will fail. I mean, it's not a that's the sad part of it. It really, I don't think anyone could have planned for such a situation. But we'll really have to see whether in my opinion, to be honest, we are going to see a big reset button which is hit. And once we open up, it's going to be, 50 aircraft, maybe reduced to 10 or 15. You never know. And so that's what's going to happen. It's going to take a few months after that to really see whether airlines are able to recover from that shock or not. So it really depends on when we open and in what form we open our market again.
Yeah, I would imagine seats would still be lesser seats on sale, I guess, even when we open, and not flying enough capacity for the time being. I don't know if you concur on that for the time being for social
Of course. I mean, if you can sell only half of 180 seats, then you're not going to, it's going to just make your task even more difficult.
Now, so brings me to another question before I circle back to the audience. Will government, government launched another scheme called Udan, where they wanted to go into tier 3 airports or airstrips not being used, places which were not connected by air services before. Now, obviously, the cesspool, everything's going to lower down. This is a reader question. Will the government continue to commit to Udan after this crisis gets over?
I think it will. Purely because they are very and extremely proud of what they have managed to do. Does it require tweaks and changes? Yes, of course. But then, it's a market which is very unique to India. But I do feel that they will continue their support for the Udan scheme. And it is something which should be done. Because, I mean, that's personal opinion. Because a dear friend of mine who works with a leasing company had once very candidly told me that India is not an A320 or 737 market. It is purely an ATR or a smaller turboprop market with shorter stage lengths, less seats to fill, and I'm beginning to sort of join and get on that bandwagon now.
I totally agree with you on that. In fact, my friends at obviously I hear it more as a marketing pitch as well, because as a member of the media. But what do you think then? Whenever the how do you put it? Whenever COVID gets over, how does the Indian market look like? You talk to practically all stakeholders, so that's the reason I put this question to you.
It's going to start in a very battered sort of. It's going to be extremely battered. It's going to start off with, as we talked about, major knee-jerk sort of reactions, where we're talking about, no hand baggage, no, flight attendants and crew dressed in, PPE equipment. It's all unsustainable. So, and we are going to be thrown into that sort of deep end of the pool. So in my opinion, it's really the year or year and a half after we reopen, which will be the decisive factor. And that will be the time where, a lot of government policies will have to be taken. A lot of knee-jerk reactions should not be taken, because those are just, very scary, and we don't want to make the situation much worse than it already is.
No, completely agree. I guess we'll, have some audience questions right now. Weber's been waiting for a while. Weber, I'm going to unmute you now. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ajay. And thanks for arranging this quite an insightful seminar for all of us. Nitin, I had a question for you. And trust me, if it even if it loosely qualifies as a professional advice, you can refrain from answering that clearly. But this is more out of curiosity. With this crisis, I'm sure a lot of airlines would now be looking at pay cuts and compulsory leave without pay for the employees. How do you see that standing from a legal standpoint, in the sense that typically in the industry, the contracts cover these kind of situations where airlines can unilaterally do such kinds of action, or this being an exceptional situation, they'll be able to defend it? Thank you so much.
That's a good question. That's a very good question. The unfortunate truth about the private sector anywhere in the world is that the first right you get by being non-government owned is the right to hire and fire. So, we may come from a very socialistic sort of past, but the airlines have complete right over who they want to, keep on their roles and who they want to sort of remove from their roles. So that's and the unfortunate part is the employees may, you can keep fighting for the rest of your life, go to court, but at the end of the day, it's there's really not much option that you have.
Thanks. You give quite a practical answers, as like your other answers. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.
Right, guys, we have Tejas. Nitin, I'm just gonna unmute him, and Tejas. Something or the other keeps happening. Tejas,
Right.
go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ajay.
Yeah.
Nitin, you have been great till now.
Thank you, Tejas. Thank you very much.
So my question is a very basic one, but in a country like India, where there are economical scenarios, political scenarios that they keep on changing every now and then, and there's more than what we expect for the near future. Are lessors more skeptical about leasing aircrafts to Indian airlines, especially considering in the last decade and a half we have seen about 2 to 3 airlines fail in the Indian aviation market?
That's a very good question. So put simply, lessors are nervous, yes, but at the same time, everyone wants a piece of the pie. So do remember that we are slated to be, I believe, if these statistics are still correct, but by 2030, we are slated to be the largest aviation market in the world. So everyone wants to get, a chunk of that. So no, I don't think there's any concern on that front. What happened with Jet Airways was extremely positive from a legal perspective. I'm not talking about Jet Airways, the bankruptcy perspective, but the ease of getting aircraft back was just remarkable. It was, the government was completely supportive. Um, so no, I don't think there's a big sort of worry there. And do bear in mind, people always draw a parallel with us with China, but do bear in mind we are the democracy. There's a big difference between
That's right.
a system which is transparent. I mean, you may say our system is not transparent, but for whatever it's worth, we do have slow systems, but they do work ultimately. But at least we have those systems in place for checks and balance.
It was quite practical. Ajay, am I allowed to answer one another quick one? Sorry, question another quick one. I'll go ahead anyways. Can you hear me, Nitin?
Yes, I can.
Right. So in the recent past, Mr. Ajay Singh also has been quite vocal about this. The MRO facilities in India, maintenance, repair and overhaul facilities. He's been quite vocal saying that India is not hosting other airlines, other countries for MROs in India, just like Lufthansa does it in Germany, Singapore Airlines does it in Singapore. So can the creation of more MRO facilities and the Indian government giving steep discounts and tax benefits reliefs to Indian airlines and promote MRO facilities bring a substantial growth to the Indian aviation, and side by side give a discounted prices for the airlines, for the commercial passengers, because they will be having another source of incomes, and passengers themselves would not be having all the load of supplying the cash to the airline.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've been the biggest advocate that we are the center of the world. I mean, you literally look at a map, we are the center point. It's just been, we've been overtaken by people on the left and the right.
Exactly.
But I am in total agreement. We must do whatever we can to promote, MRO facilities. Why should our planes be going overseas to get,
Right.
their heavy maintenance checks done?
And
It just
there's where
doesn't
they
make
are
sense.
losing out. They're paying in dollars and they're losing out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that I can understand the main issue which our government faces is, the whole setup of the GST council. If you're doing it for this industry, why aren't you doing it for another industry? But there are disadvantages of a democratic setup, unfortunately. But that's we need to work on this very, very seriously.
Simple advantage being taken by the Middle Eastern carriers, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Anyways, it was great, Nitin. Thank you so much
Same here,
for
Tejas.
answering.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Ajay.
Yeah, Nitin, I think let's kind of, get on to some fun things. We've been having a very serious chat, I would imagine. Had
Actually,
it been another day, we would have
Ajay,
raised
before
a few
you do that,
$1 million.
please permit me
No,
to interject. There's one small fact which I actually wanted to state at the beginning, but because we were sort of on a shaky start, I forgot to do that. Just to put some numbers into perspective.
Yeah.
We talk about aircraft financing and A320s, 737s all the time. So these are list prices. These are not what people will actually pay, but it will be fairly close. The list price for an A320 is $101 million. So this is as per, statistics I got online. If you translate that, convert that into Indian rupees, that's 767 crores for one A320. Similarly, for a 737, the list price is roughly 90 million. So that's 684 crores. Then we move on to the bigger boys, say a Boeing 777, which is a list price of 320 million, which is 2,432 crores. So people have to bear in mind that a fleet of, even 10 of these we're talking in thousands of crores, if not more. that's just something which, we forget from time to time about, these high value assets that we're talking about. So.
Yeah, well,
It was really just stating a point. I mean, there's no follow up, but I think we forget um, these things.
Nitin, I'm just gonna join back in from a cell phone instead of a computer. Why don't you guys continue the chat in the meanwhile? I'll just be back.
So
Sure.
Nitin, may I ask a question? Given that Ajay is just joining back. Hi, my name is Adil. Again, thanks so much. You've been brilliant today. Quick question. Given the numbers that you just stated, Nitin, do we see global fleet sizes shrinking and aircrafts continuing to innovate to optimize for capacity?
I'm not really sure. Again, I'm not. That is really slightly beyond my sphere of knowledge. But I do. I really I don't have an answer to that. I'm sorry. I can't give you a definitive sort of answer.
Thank you.
What would your opinion be, though? It would be interesting to hear sort of your take.
Well, I'm no aviation expert, but the one thing that I do think could happen is the way the world is moving is every company is turning out to be a software company. And if there's one sector where I feel we haven't seen enough innovation yet, I feel that's the aviation sector. All the engineering magic that has happened to benefit the airlines, not necessarily the consumer. Now, I think given world events like COVID, a lot more innovation might happen a lot more faster. And therefore, a lot more organizations might be a lot more risk averse, is the general trend that I potentially foresee. But like I said, I'm no expert. I'm very keen to learn from experts like you and Ajay to get more insights.
No, thank you. It's I mean, I think the global trend has always been that fleets are increasing. But again, with the 737 Max in the picture, that just throws another spanner. So it's anyone's guess what's going to happen.
Exactly. So this very well could be potentially a point of inflection, which is what caused my concern and thought process.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Hi, Nitin. This is Daniel here. Got a question for you.
Hi, Daniel. How are you? I've known you a very, very long time, but I don't think we've ever met. Is that correct?
It's been more than 10 years since we have spoken long back.
Yes.
But okay, a quick question. Now, since you spoke earlier about airlines not honoring contracts towards employees in these situations, now we know of 2 airlines who have not paid their employees since last month.
Mm-hmm.
And in this sort of a situation, if an employee wants to use breach of contract, okay, does he have to use that right now, or can it be like maybe a couple of months down the line when things get better or something like that? Can he cite breach of contract and leave the company or something like that?
Breach of contract, number one, again, has to be determined by a court of law. So before the employee goes to a court of law, he has to reach within, a period of limitation, is called. And, you can't wait for 15 years and then file a case. So the law clearly states that for different sort of cases and different breaches, how long you can wait before approaching a court of law. So it will be time bound. It will be time bound and really on a case-to-case basis.
Okay, so you have to go through the long process again, which again defeats the whole purpose of going through that.
See, the thing is, the unfortunate truth in our country is if you're a government employee, you have a whole different set of rules which you can sort of implement in a court of law. You can file a writ petition, you can do all sorts of other things. The problem with the private sector in our country is the proper remedy under law is to file a civil suit or a suit for damages, which is again is a civil suit which can take years and years and years. So that's the sad part.
So I've got another question regarding the 737 Max.
Yes.
Now, in the case of SpiceJet, they had bought a whole lot of aircraft and they wanted to sell and lease back. Now, considering the present situation and the situation that happened earlier with Boeing, since the airline goes into an agreement with the lessor, would they be bound to pay the lessor all along in spite of COVID and without COVID?
Again, I haven't dealt with any of those personally, but I don't. I think the answer would be is that they are purely surviving on the compensation which is being given by Boeing, and I'm not sure whether they've agreed that the airline will pass on the compensation to the lessor or vice versa. It really depends on what airlines have negotiated.
But they are bound to pay the lessor irrespective, right?
Under a lease agreement, yes. Under a lease agreement, yes, unless they sit across the table subsequently and of course defer sort of payments, because this is something which no one could have foreseen.
Correct. Okay.
The 737 Max issue, not the COVID-19.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
Ajay, Nitin, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Yeah, I had two questions. Firstly, I had the opportunity to fly with you as well many years back, you and Ajay, and I can see Langani as well.
Okay.
So my question here is, so how long does it take for a particular leaser, suppose he is leasing the aircraft which is there in the same country, to give it to another company? What is the time process? How much does it take? I'll give you an example of Jet Airways aircraft, which was there as 737, same country in India, which was given to SpiceJet. So how long, what is the duration, all the documentation and all, how long does it take? And second question is, when the leasing is beneficial and it's feasible for every airline, why is it that airlines owe some aircraft? They have purchased, the aircraft. What can be the reason for that?
Okay, coming to your first question about transferring from one operator to the other, it can be done virtually overnight. It really depends on what sort of configuration, what sort of other aspects. From the jet to SpiceJet transition, it's very interesting that you bring this up. So our law currently states that the jet aircraft, so for example, just using your example, that a jet aircraft technically has to first leave the country. So it has to be re-exported from India and then has to be re-imported back into the country. Now, very interestingly, what happened in the SpiceJet case was the government came out with a very special waiver for lessors who wanted to lease to SpiceJet. So what they said was, you don't have to re-export that aircraft from India, provided. Now, the proviso to this is very important. Provided the person taking the aircraft on lease, which would be, SpiceJet in this case, would pay or give a bond for paying that GST, which was outstanding against that particular aircraft. So I think it was something to those extents. I don't have that notification in front of me, but there was the government was extremely proactive in sort of jumping and keeping those aircraft within the country, which was very impressive.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for this.
Nitin, my second question was why airlines own the aircraft when the leasing is so feasible?
Okay, so yeah, sorry, I missed your second question completely. So there are a number of reasons. The first being, what sort of business plan the airline has. So that is paramount. Number two, traditionally, the benefits of leasing an aircraft have been, because this high value asset remains off your balance sheet. So that has been the reason why airlines have been choosing, the leasing sort of model as opposed to the outright purchase. But then again, I'm not an accountant. I do believe that the accounting regulations have changed, and airlines do have to account for the whole value of the lease rentals over the whole term of the lease agreement in their books. So I'm not really sure. That's really more of an accounting question, but those were the reasons why airlines chose to either build equity in the aircraft or just outright lease them.
Thank you so much. Just let you know that I was part of Yellow and Bluebird and got the opportunity to fly with you as well.
Oh, excellent.
And Ajay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Not at all.
I'm back here, and I hope you did not miss.
I think, Ajay, we have a question on manufacturing. I don't know whether you're going to factor that in.
Yeah, sure, go ahead, and then we can move on to the fun part.
I think the biggest issues which we face for, should we try to manufacture aircraft in the country is, number one, the cost of such development. I think it's extremely prohibitive. I believe, there are couples of, there are tens or 20s of billions of dollars which go into development of aircraft. It could also be the tax structure. I'm not really sure. That's a good question. I haven't been asked that question before, but it's not the Tatas who have any scope, but I believe if there's any company who had any interest in manufacturing, it would probably be the Mahindras because of their interest in aviation. But then again, pure speculation.
Yeah, I think, Mahindras already have an aircraft that
an Italian company, I believe, right?
Yeah. And I think HAL has potential, but the catch is, it's a 20, 30-year long cycle. I would imagine we've had China trying to break through for roughly about 15, 20 years now. The Russians have been trying to break into that market, but the thing of entering into aviation manufacturing is not only do you need a high pedigree and a kick-ass product, you also need to be able to kind of, sustain yourself and outspend the other party for many, many years before you kind of get a dominant position. And you always got to watch your back. So, Airbus really took off when they kind of got the freedom to operate as they would want to be, because Airbus was a nationalistic company, a joint venture between so many countries, but they only took off really once they got the ability to operate on their own terms. So, and I guess all these, not to put them down, but all these questions are random questions, in the sense, would it be, in the sense, it's all hypothetical, unless we're going to commit $500 billion to this, it's just hypothetical, if India is going to be able to make aircraft. I know it's very nice on a, to say that airlines can, build aircraft in India, but at the end of the day, the only reason Airbus took the factory to China was because they were getting 2,000 or 3,000 aircraft on day one, because they purchased centrally. Right, Nitin?
That is correct. That is correct.
Yeah. So tell us, Nitin. I mean, I think we've kind of, in me coming and going, we've lost some time. But tell us about your first flight. What memories do you have of your first flight? I don't know when it was. Tell us more.
That's an interesting question. My memory of my first flight is somewhat in the year 1989. So I was roughly about four years old, where we had gone to Hong Kong. That would be my first sort of vague memory. My very, very clear memory is flying KLM, though a few years later, that unmistakable sort of blue livery. And again, I think we were going to the US at that particular point. But I remember coming back, and that's all I would be drawing in school would be a KLM 747 with the 4 dots and the cross on top on its tail.
Yeah.
But that would be my first sort of memory of my first one of my first few flights. So.
Yeah, too bad. The KLM 747s are going away now, right? Because of COVID.
Oh yes.
Yeah. But I do see behind you, you've done tons of KLM flights. Do you have the entire series as of now, the Delft Hubble or not?
So basically, that's also a bit of a funny story. So we've had a few of those miniatures lying around at home for forever. It's one of those things where you fly KLM once and you get one of these miniatures and you don't understand what they're part of. So we ended up having a few of these lying around for donkey's years, until sometime in my teens, a friend of mine and I realized that they have alcohol in them. So we went around sort of trying to puncture them and trying to salvage the alcohol. And a complete regret now, because I think those are some of the extremely valuable ones, but now they have these holes in their chimneys where we tried to extract the alcohol. But no, I don't have the whole series. I unfortunately haven't flown KLM in a long time. But it's as many as I can collect as of now.
No, so I remember beginning of the conversation you were telling us about your young daughter, and so I think you wanted to take her out on her first. Tell us about her first flight. You had some things planned, and not sure if they worked out or not.
Well, for her first flight, I try to plan these silly things because they mean a lot to me, even though they may not mean a lot to others. But I wanted her to really fly the best that was possible. So we had initially planned from Chandigarh, where we're based, to fly to Delhi on Vistara, which at that time, not at that time, which still is probably the best full service carrier, in my opinion. Sorry for any Air India fans out there. But we planned to fly to Delhi on Vistara and then Singapore Airlines to Singapore. Specifically because it was an A380, and so I had chosen seat 1A on the A380 for that flight to Singapore, which did work out. The Vistara flight never worked out. We ended up driving to Delhi. So her first flight was on Singapore Airlines on the A380 in seat 1A. So that was a small little memory for her. And of course, I've stuck her boarding pass to my flight log. So hopefully she'll keep it when I'm dead and gone. And I think you're stuck again. Right. Go ahead. Anyone else with any questions?
Well, I'll go ahead with one. I'm sure you must have heard about you're dealing in it daily, the EU 261 regulation.
Yes.
So for some viewers who don't know about it, it's a compensation law by the EU Council of the airlines or the government maybe, which says that if your flight is delayed by the airline, because of the airline and not because of any ATC problems or weather problems, they have to pay a compensation. I think it's for 3 hours, it's 250 euros. For 4 hours, it's 500 euros. And for 6 hours and above, it's 600 euros. So I have myself had the privilege of flying free of cost with KLM twice because they delayed the flight more than 6 hours. So Nitin, do you see something like that coming up in India, in the Indian aviation? Would it push the airlines to be more on time and give us more on time service?
Look, I think we already have quite a severe sort of level as far as, comparative other comparisons go, if that makes sense. So it may not be a lot of money, 10 or 15,000 rupees compensation, but if you compare it to other industries and compensation which is paid in other areas, it is still very high. I don't see something like 261 coming in such a severe form in India, because it's just I've had free Virgin Atlantic flights to London because of that. So extremely enjoyable. You instantly get 50,000 rupees back, which is a huge amount. And just to touch upon on that, it's not only it's for any airline that is operating to the. So, hi, welcome back, Ajay.
Yeah, sorry, this is a mess at mine. I don't know why.
People are usually scared of lawyers, so it's fine.
Oh, well, I come from a family of lawyers, right? So, yeah, anyways, let's hope the connection holds. So, rapid fire right now.
Sorry, you broke up there again, Ajay. You'll have to re-ask your question.
I'm saying, I think it's time to start wrapping up.
That's absolutely
scheduled
fine.
time. So it's been a very interesting conversation. Though I will have to go take a full replay of the recording. Luckily, we're recording this. And I'm hoping the connection holds for the next 5 minutes. I'm going to put you through a quick rapid fire, but before that, I'm not sure if Captain Negi is still around. He wanted to tell us about your logbook. Captain, are you around?
Ajay, yes, I'm there. Just a quick thing about Nitin. So I met Nitin in 2018. I was operating a flight from Delhi to Doha. And usually on the flight, once in a while, you get a logbook for a passenger asking you to fill out details. So I received a logbook. But that wasn't just an ordinary logbook. It was super detailed. It had a whole bunch of flights, boarding cards stuck onto it with more information. And I actually went through it. It had probably more flights than I've operated, and that too all in business class and first class all throughout. So I was pretty amazed by it, and I made it a point to go back and meet Nitin and had a good quick word with him. And lo and behold, about a year later, I get another logbook, which comes to the cockpit, and I think it was in the same sector. And it was as detailed as Nitin's. And I looked at the name, it said Shikhar Sarin. So I said, okay, this guy has obviously got to do something with Nitin Sarin. So I requested the crew to just request Shikhar to meet me once the flight is over. So I met him. My first question was, do you know Nitin? He said, yes, I do. He's my uncle, I think. So I said, yeah, I think Jet Fuel pretty much runs in the Sarin family, and they're the real avgeeks because of the way they passionately deal with this entire industry and the thoughts that they have behind this.
Thank you.
Nitin, you have something to add about that? Tell us about the logbook.
So the logbook is something I started in 2006. I keep all the details, flight crew, altitude, landing, takeoff, runway, all sorts of things. And I try to make it as colorful as possible, sticking all my boarding passes on it and things. So it's just it's a very nice interactive sort of tool, especially after September the 11th, where, flight crew are just locked behind their, impenetrable sort of doors. So it just kind of adds a very nice touch to flying, and you get excellent service. There's no doubt about it. Every time I have a flight log, it is something, India flights as it is have this notorious sort of, are notorious, at least for the flight attendants thing, that, they're difficult passengers. So the moment you hand something over like that, you instantly get star treatment, and you build relationships like this one with Captain Puneet, which is absolutely fantastic.
So I think, when the captain told me about the logbook, I kind of went looking out for it. And for those who haven't seen it, I think I'll try and retweet it on Twitter afterwards. But it's really, I think 2 pages full of information about the flight with the maps of the flight, if any, boarding pass, and a lot of other details. But Nitin, what happens if you forget your logbook home?
I will never forget my logbook at home. Before I put my passport in the bag, I have to put my flight log in the bag. I've had dreams about boarding a flight and forgetting my logbook at home. I will never forget it. So.
All right, maybe you could keep some backup printouts as well, huh? But
well,
yeah, I guess we'll I know Arpit is after me for a question, but let me kind of, Arpit, why don't you unmute yourself and ask the question. Yeah. We could not touch upon the drones part. Arpit was kind of talk to you a bit about drones.
Yeah, thank you, Ajay, for letting me in. I hope, Nitin, you can hear me.
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Yeah, so I read in the email from Ajay that you've started taking a keen interest in the drone laws and all as well. I hope I'm not wrong.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Yes.
Yeah. So my question was, I've recently read somewhere that the drones which are weighing less than 250 grams are being allowed to operate in many of the countries without any registration. So can you let us know from an Indian perspective, is there any law as such which permits you to operate a drone if it's light enough, lighter than 250 grams?
So in India at the moment, there's a complete prohibition. This is a big misconception because people are still selling DJI drones, which fall within that category. I mean, it has to be clarified. You cannot fly those drones yet. You can only fly drones which are, you still have to go and register them on the Digital Sky app. But those drones are only allowed which are available in the drop-down menu, which I believe are only 2 or 3 manufacturers, Indian manufacturers till now. So there is no option for any DJI sort of drone to be flown as it stands today.
Okay. I also have a small follow-up question on that. How easy is it to register a drone? If I want to purchase one, how easy is it to register one?
I wouldn't know because I own about 6 or 7 drones. They are all DJI drones. I cannot register them because the system just doesn't accept that manufacturer. So it doesn't let me go beyond that page where it says, I enter my name, address, and then I get stuck at the section which asks me for the manufacturer's name. I've never seen anyone buy an Indian drone before, so I don't know where they're available and what capabilities they have. So I cannot answer your question. I've never done it myself.
Well, thanks, guys. I think that was a beautiful chat. Nitin, last round. And if the connection holds, you get a goodie bag, okay? I don't know what's going to be inside the goodie bag because only after lockdown can I commit to you. This is going to be about 10 questions, 10 seconds each, okay?
Okay.
So let's get started with the rapid fire. What would you name your own airline?
Oh, good Lord. I knew you'd ask me that. I can't think of a name, but I do know the livery will be in black like Air New Zealand.
All right. Airbus or Boeing?
Airbus.
Why?
I'm just generally, I did my internship with Airbus. I like their automation. I like everything about Airbus. For Boeing, I like the 777-300ER, my absolute favorite.
Okay, we're not getting you on the Vistara 787, okay? Favorite place to go?
Favorite place to go is Goa.
Okay, favorite book?
I haven't read a book in many years. Don't tell anyone that.
Okay, favorite meal on a plane?
Favorite meal on a plane? Whatever they have. I'm not a big foodie.
Okay. Favorite drink on a plane?
Rosé champagne, if they have any. I feel really bad because your last people on the show, everyone had black coffee, and I still feel very immature saying rosé champagne.
No. We're totally on the same page. Don't. I was disappointed hearing black coffee, but I guess we have to reach a certain standard to just appreciate black coffee. So when was the last time you traveled by train?
The last time probably a month ago, because Delhi Chandigarh I do very often on the Shatabdi Express.
All right. Favorite aircraft?
The 777-300ER, without a doubt.
Okay. Perhaps I know what I'm going to get as the answer, but have you flown supersonic?
I have never, but I've come close because my father did, I believe in 98. He's watching this, upstairs, but he did fly Concorde on a very special deal, which they had. You buy first class to New York and they'll swap one sector from New York to London on the Concorde. So I've got all of the, I've got the safety cards, I've got the meals, the menu, the photo frame, everything which they handed out to him. I have it lying opposite me right now, in fact.
Oh, lovely. I think for me, I've only seen the Concorde in the Boeing Museum, the Museum of Flight, twice over. But yeah, the final question. One thing no one knows about you as a Navy geek.
One thing no one knows about me. That I wanted to be a pilot, I guess. That's not something very newsworthy, but I can't because I'm red-green colorblind. So.
And here I thought you were going to tell us about how you wanted to be the biggest photographer on airliners.net, right?
That used to, my tagline on airliners.net used to be, I want every airport, every aircraft to be on airliners.net. I was very obsessive about airliners.
Well, there's a long life ahead, and let's hope you're going to get there in good time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nitin. It was an excellent conversation. Apologies for my jittery connection. Never happened. Six Sigma event, force majeure, whatever you want to call it. Thank you again, and we'll speak soon. And I'll get you that goodie bag once we are back in the air. Yeah.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you, Ajay.
Thanks, guys, for joining in today. You are excellent company, and take care and stay at home and wash your hands. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Nitin. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ajay, you were a brilliant version of our F geek Karan Johar.
Thanks.
All right. Cheers, man.
You guys. Bye.